Hello. It's lovely to be here and talk about this important and pressing topic, which is purpose and business, and bringing that closer together. And I think essentially when we look into the world today and we look at the business world, there's on the one hand quite a lot of light that we can see and new solutions, new ways to work together that are emerging, new business models, and a lot of new methodologies and practices. And at the same time, when we take a deep look at the business world today, we can also see the darker sides and the shadows and how we're utilizing natural resources. At the same time, work culture, topics such as burnout, and where astonishingly as well, actually topics such as burnout or issues such as burnout even occur with a higher frequency in the purpose-driven business world. And so I'm really delighted to today come together with an extraordinary group of people who are all bringing their purpose into business and looking at ways how purpose can manifest in business. A group of people who are digging really deep and broad, and I think you're in for a treat. They could each, I think, fill these 50 minutes on their own and tell really amazing stories, but what we collectively or kind of together decided was that we would love to open this conversation, have a very deep conversation about how business manifests, how purpose manifests in business, really looking also into the difficult sides of that, into the places where it gets messy and complex, and finding, maybe learning together how we can broaden this movement and strengthen how we manifest our purpose in business. And we'd love to extend this conversation to you, and we're really looking forward also to a longer phase of questions. I think we're gonna take about 10, 15 minutes at the end where we really wanna open this conversation to you. And we even thought of actually sitting with you in the audience, of bringing you closer. So if anybody wants to do that, you're welcome. But I think now I'll hand it over to my wonderful guests, and I would love to invite you each to introduce yourselves, and we can hold it popcorn style, I think, in this group. And I would just like to ask you, whoever wants to start, to tell us a bit about what your purpose is and how you manifest it in your business and in your work. So in order to have enough time for our conversation, I think we had agreed before that we would try to stick to between 2 and 5 minutes, and I said whoever nails the 3 minutes is in for a treat.
So I'm Joana. I'm local. I'm from Berlin. I founded an online crowdfunding platform called betterplace.org 11 years ago. And we are a social business, social entrepreneurs. And 8 years ago, we also founded a think tank to look at how digitalization is impacting the social change scene and how we can use digital tools to improve the situation of the world. So we are very much impact-driven in what we are doing, and I think it came about for me personally that whenever, and I had a career before, I'm an anthropologist, and I did a lot of research and writing about cultural globalization. And my drive, in a way, was just that I found things interesting. You know, you probably know the situation, that many people tell you things or you read things, and some you think, oh, that's cool, yeah, but it doesn't really do anything for you. So I think what I then turned into professions were the things where I felt this was really exciting. This was really, in a way, above my ceiling, but so much above my ceiling that I could still see that this was something new which I wanted to bring into the world. And I think it's really interesting to fill this place between where you are currently and where you think the future is going to happen, and how you actually make the right steps to get there. When I look back, I left Better Place. I'm sitting in our board 4 years ago, and what I did was my next step. I read Frederic Laloux, and Tom was mentioning Laloux's Teal organization, reinventing organization. And I was so just fascinated by this idea of self-organizing and of not using the normal conventional hierarchies, which I, as a founder and as a CEO, had found pretty boring myself at some point. That I then decided to stay on at Better Place, but only really to lead this transformation into self-organization. It has worked pretty well, but again, my interest was spurred because we also saw that many things didn't work well. And we really learned that we need to do a lot of inner work. That's when I came to inner work. I noticed that outside changes, and when we look at the changes we need in this world, we see, as Alice mentioned, we see a lot of new business models, new value chains being created, new products. I work in the digital sphere, so this is such a hugely exciting, era to be in. And at the same time, we are not really being able to take advantage of what is new out there if we don't really accompany the changes in the outside world with changes in our inner world. So for us, it's been a really interesting journey of how to do outer and inner change at the same time. It takes a big investment, and it's really not that simple as I thought it would be. But for me, again, that was really something, so that my next stop, and I just founded a new company 1 month ago, is really looking at this much more specifically, at looking at outside change and inner change, and can we, by empowering startups in a new way and not only harnessing this bro culture, but really creating a culture of diversity and inner spaciousness, can we really also make these companies more successful and the people more healthy, and also that they are not only optimizing their financial return, but really create companies which are healthy for the planet and for us humans.
You passed it to me. Okay, hi. My name is Steffen Stauber, and I'm the founder of a company called Create Meaning, and we work with entrepreneurs. And we help them to define their purpose, to find their purpose, and then help their organizations on the way to actually implement that. To help them on the journey, as you said, it's a big journey, an outer journey and an inner journey. And we accompany on the way with different partners, different workshops, different initiatives. My background is I worked shall I say, the dark side. I used to start in advertising. So I learned a lot of tools of how to tell stories in order to manipulate people to buy stuff they don't need. And at one point on that journey, I realized that this is not what I want to do. I want to use creativity to basically solve business problems. And that took me on a decade journey in different positions, from strategy, innovation, ended up in management, consulting, and organizational development. And then I realized that I don't want to do it for big corporations, because, and this is going to be interesting in that discussion, I see it very, very hard to be in a system that's so inclined with the bigger system that you can really change something from within. So that's why we focus on entrepreneurs. At the same time, we co-created a space here called the Co-Creation Loft. Some of you might have heard it. 2 of my colleagues and co-creators are sitting here in the audience, or 3 of them actually. And this is a place where we can actually be vulnerable together and explore these new perspectives of how we can, as a person, affect change and bring people together. We call it a safe space to explore new perspectives. And this is the work what we're doing here together with a foundation in Berlin to bring people like that together and have these conversations, because we don't have the answers, but we believe we need a dialogue to do that. So really excited to be with you guys here on this panel today.
Okay, so I want to say thank you first of all to Alice, who actually founded or co-founded this whole space, and without her we would not be here today. And the Circular Economy House is actually one of these organizations who's bringing in new ideas into our society, locally and globally. So I really appreciate what you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you.
And you all too. And you all. So my name is Benedikt, and I'm working at the Dive. And I think I start off in the beginning. I think the whole process for me started of finding out what is my purpose when after school you have certain ways where to go, and some of them are like more usual. And I decided to not go the usual way, so I went to South America, lived there for 2 years, and worked with a lot of NGOs and businesses, and got to know really different perspectives on the world, and really understood physically that it's all one world. We're not living in the first, second, or third world, how we call it, and that led me also to understand that, I was asking my grandma always, like, what did you do during World War II, and how did you manage, and didn't you say no to whatever happened? And then I was asking myself, like, okay, so actually the next generation is already there, so in some years they will be asking me, what did you do? So that was kind of the waking up point for me. So I think I have a lot of questions. I feel that with the questions, answers evolved. And at the Dive, I'm taking the role of sustainability. So how can we actually be a sustainable business, but also bring that to the clients? And the Dive, whoever not knows, the Dive is, so we started actually only 3 years ago, and it's about consulting and transformational consulting, a lot of giving space to big questions, to big companies also, because they realize, okay, we had a lot of time hierarchy, we had a lot of time maybe matrix organization, and now it doesn't seem to fit anymore, and we have to have maybe new ideas. So we actually just hold the space for questions, find new ways, help them. And also we have a magazine called New Narratives, so what narratives do we have to talk to each other in order that transformation really can manifest? I think I'm in the 3 minutes, so I'm handing over.
Hi, my name is Mounira, and my journey, I don't know, I think my journey really started when I was born. Maybe for all of us. Anyways, so my origin is Tunisia. Both my parents are Tunisian, and my father came to Germany as a classical guest worker. So they had these trucks, and they would say, "Who wants to work in Germany? Just jump on the truck and come." And that's how he ended up in Germany. And from my childhood, I had like a real conflict of who I was. So who am I was a really big question for me. Little did I know back then that this can be one of the most profound questions. Because my parents would say, "You're Tunisian, we will always be Tunisian." But when I went to Tunisia, everyone is like, "Oh, she's the one from Germany." And in Germany, in the middle of Bavaria, everyone looked at me and they're like, "Where are you from?" So for me, it was clear, I'm also not really a German. And so what I did is I straightened my hair and I tried to look more German. And also my mother, at one point, she said, "Oh, your name is too complicated, no one can spell it. From now on, you're gonna be called Moni." And the funny thing is, my sister and my brother, they still call me like that. So sometimes when friends are with me, they're like, "Moni? Huh?" Because at one point, I decided, okay, if I'm not one or the other, I can just choose what I want to be. And it's a funny story, and also it really helped me to always look beyond, right? It made me, because I never fitted in really, and that, like, being okay with not fitting in helped me to be okay with not fitting in other circumstances. Yeah, and my journey led me actually to be in some of the biggest corporates. I never wanted to be there, but it always just happened. And I was like, okay, if the flow goes there, I'm just gonna do this. So I worked for BMW, for Red Bull, and then for Google. And I was in management jobs and doing marketing and communication and PR. And at the same time, I always had this question, because at one point, after 3 years of working in business, I felt like I don't really like myself the way I am in this field, right? It really changed me, because you just do everything that everyone else is doing, and at one point you're like, who am I? What happened with that girl that wanted to be nice to everyone and laugh with everyone and all that stuff? And it led me to a question. So first of all, I had the question, should I quit and just go out and do something else? But I always wanted to know, can I stay and just change something by staying and by just changing myself? And I read this book, and that said, you just, go into your inner journey, and then you will just change the outside just by changing your inside. And I just tried it out. I'm like, okay, I want to see that. So I just changed everything that I wanted to see changed outside in my inside. And it worked. And so I did it another time and another time. And so for more than 10 years, I've been trying this again and again. And it worked every time, and it works even better, more and more. And so my biggest, passion is to actually help people to step into their own power. And for me, it starts, like Joana said, with this very internal journey, right? For me, the internal journey cannot, purpose is for me a very internal journey. It starts with me being authentic, hearing my authentic voice. Where is he? Where in the body is it? What does she say? What are all the other voices saying? Which one is it? Is it even there? And then from there, for me, purpose is something that goes beyond myself. So it is very, let's say, first of all, it feels to me very self-centered, but then it goes away from what do I want, and it always has this notion of being part of something bigger, and how does this serve this whatever bigger thing it is, and with a lot of respect and humbleness for not knowing any answers, and I agree with you, it's something we need to discuss, and I'm super glad for John and the team of Greenheart and everyone who is involved here, because I believe we need to have these forums that we can actually talk about these things and come together, because there's so much to do. and many people that I meet, they tell me, I'm so glad that you're talking about these things, because I felt I was the only one thinking like that. And so, because I know how it feels to not belong anywhere, I'm always trying to get the people in and say, yeah, not alone, exactly. So we are all not alone, and I'm happy that we're all here together. Thank you. I don't know if it's 2 minutes.
Well, boy, it's kind of difficult to follow up on all that. My name is Christiane. I'm born and raised Austrian, turned a nomad last year. So I'll try and keep it short but precise. So I've explored the world of being an employee. I founded my own business, my first own business in, I'll say 1989, and have been a CEO of our family company, blah, 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 all that. Exploring the conventional way of work and getting increasingly depressed and unhappy, going on my own spiritual journey. And I thought about maybe I should change my purpose to a world where people get in touch with their authentic purpose without going through a burnout. But as we heard today, most people experience a burnout and then start their spiritual journey and their personal journey. Same for me. So anyway, so there's the time after that. And there's that classical entrepreneurial thing, boy, there has to be a different way. And this kind of experiencing people being depressed, people being unhappy, forcing themselves to keep going. And my own sense of that things were really going deeply wrong. So I ran into holacracy. I'm one of the 5 European, I think about 5 European holacracy pioneers. And this was clear to me the moment I started learning about it, that this was something really different. I always said it's the beauty behind it, without knowing what the beauty behind it is. It took me a few years actually to find out the depth of the shift that this stands for. And I can tell you today, holacracy is mindfulness for organizations. And if you really get it, that's what it really is. So that's when I met Tom, obviously, and we started working together, experiencing, going through that shift myself, really being forced through learning to let go, to unlearn and learn, relearn, really completely new power dynamics, and learning what holacracy is and what it isn't. And also learning to understand that holacracy is a developmental catalyst. It differentiates something out. And so after some years of practicing myself, learning what it doesn't do, so these, you just heard that, those tensions that came up, I was privileged enough to be in conversation with Tom, and now I'm a founding member of ENCODE. And of encode.org, doing the work that you just heard about. Before encode.org came into my life, I started to work for what was meant to be an organization called Evolution at Work. And Evolution at Work was founded, sort of started existing with holacracy, and it didn't work. It didn't work. It went into hibernation. And ENCODE was my primary focus. And through the experience of working in a for-purpose enterprise, somehow Evolution at Work re-emerged. And so I was lucky enough to go through the startup process of starting up as a second organization, a for-purpose enterprise. And this time it worked. And boy, did it work as a for-purpose enterprise. Everything is for purpose. And Evolution at Work, it was mainly sort of formed around the rising need that we have many organizational answers, but going through that shift is a deep personal transformational journey. And it is really so fundamentally different that people who are very often forced through that shift need a safe space to explore without having to be afraid, to explore that personal shift that it brings. And that's what Evolution at Work is about. And so I am privileged and thankful to be working in 2 organizations that are really, really purpose aligned for me. And now my personal purpose is, as it expresses itself at the moment, and maybe you can understand now why these 2 organizations are so important to me. My personal purpose expresses itself at the moment as the manifestation of love in the way we do our work in the world, individually and collectively. Thank you.
Yeah, I think I'm actually really privileged to have you guys on stage here with me, and I'm really looking forward now to entering into this conversation. Really happy that my sister-in-law just arrived. That's great. Hi, Hannah, welcome. And And so I think you have really inspiring journeys, each of you, in discovering your purpose and bringing it into the world. And you've totally blown away my notes. They were here, and now they've expanded to here, so please apologize. So you've mentioned depth a number of times, each of you. And I would love to ask you about the depth of the shift. So what for you would a world look like in which business is fully purpose-oriented? What does business look like to you, each of you individually, in that world? And what do we have to unlearn to get there? Popcorn style.
So personally, I would love to start to give a little bit of context, because I think purpose, transformation, collaboration, co-creation, love, beautiful words, but the reality is super hard. It's so hard, especially when you sit in this echo chamber. You know, we have all of the same words going around, which is really, really powerful. But I think what I would love to add to this conversation, to talk about how hard it is to confront your own shadows and the shadows of an organization. So in the work we do, what comes up is it's actually not easy to live your purpose, especially as an organization, because what it does, it confronts you to see the truth. And if we're really honest, when we look into the mirror, who wants to see the truth if they're not willing to really engage into that deep transformational work? And so for me, the work would be paradise. We have right now the necessary resources, the necessary knowledge, the necessary capacity as humanity to turn the world into paradise. We have that, that's a fact, right? So what keeps us from it? And I think what keeps us from it is to also acknowledge the truth behind how hard it is to do this work. How hard it is as an organization to do this work. So it's not enough to write a purpose statement on the wall and say, like, now we are for the planet and triple bottom line and circular and all of these kind of things, which is beautiful in the right direction. But what it takes is to really like a deep and hard look in the mirror. And many people are not ready for that. So for me, the whole conversation is, I would love to take it a little bit outside of the echo chamber. And echo, I use these words transformation and purpose so much, so I'm guilty myself. But I would love us to have the conversation about the truth behind it and how hard it is to arrive to this point, and how can we create circumstances where we can do that at scale. Because if we don't do it, the way we're marching as humanity is, right now, it can look like a very dark space. So for me, that's what's driving me, and that's what's challenging me every day when I look into the mirror and ask myself, is it the truth or not? And yeah, that's what I'm sitting with right now, pretty epically.
Yeah, I can maybe continue. I mean, following up on what you are saying, Steffen, I think what we are really lacking as a society, and maybe not in these circles here, because this is, as you said, a very special group, we are really lacking the vocabulary, the concepts, which are acceptable in a more mainstream way. When I talk about certain things to a more general audience, sometimes I feel, you know, I'm saying things and they don't land at all. And so really, I mean, I think it is on us to devise ways of how we can bridge this gap and how we can really see where the other people are at, whether it's a company we consult with, whether we partner with it, and just to see how much of a stretch it is very often to do this. And I think, you know, we really don't know. I personally, I mean, I did a Gestalt therapy when I was, you know, in my 20s, when I had my children, and I thought, oh, I don't want to pass all my shit, you know, onto them one-to-one. But I then met a spiritual teacher, Thomas Hübel, who really for me gave me a map of how the inner world can look like, and practices, and we've heard it a number of times here, you know. I mean, I think without a deep practice, let it be meditation, you know, it can be anything, it can be different kinds of therapy. I think we are just not going to get this kind of transformation because it is not something which we can just read about in a journal and, you know, do one workshop, because we need to embody it. Yeah, I think so much of, and that's, I think I'm also quite critical sometimes of this transformation and purpose scene, because I feel it's so fluffy. It's so much in the head, and it is so much not really fully embodied. And I see so many people talking about purpose, then trying to do a project and not getting it on the ground because, oh, the next day, you know, the purpose doesn't feel so right anymore, and maybe, you know, it doesn't resonate with me so much. You know, maybe I'm going to do something else. So, you know, we need to have this right mix of, it's not all purpose, but it's purpose, lots of hard work and just staying on track when you don't feel the purpose at all. So that is my own learning, that it is this mix of finding your inner path. And then if we can really shift this, and I think companies are beautiful vehicles and multipliers and multiplicators for this kind of transformation, because you have thousands of people, millions of people working in workspaces, and maybe, you know, the corporate world is now the cutting edge of where this shift we are talking about is happening, because they are running into so many problems, also the way how we work when we talk about organizational development. So I'm in a way pretty optimistic, because we are running in such a crisis that we need to change something, and so, you know, let's do it.
Yeah.
Applause. Let's do it.
So many things resonate. I also come back to things that we already heard about this morning. Coming back to your question, I think from my personal perspective, there is a deep respect for where everybody is standing. And so for the work that I do, that my colleagues and I do, there's purpose is the radar where resonance happens. And we heard about a clear yes and no this morning, which is beautiful. I think the work, or let me put it that way, the way I hold it, and I think my colleagues hold it, is we are not out in the field to convince anybody of anything. So there is an increasing number of people out there who sense that a shift is emerging and that they're starting to go on that journey. And I think the work that we are doing is to be there when this resonance happens. So to create the spaces for those who are ready to go, because I believe in evolution and it's going to happen anywhere. This is not going anywhere, it is happening. And I have the trust that, excuse me, that we do one part of the work that it needs, I think so, otherwise I wouldn't do it, and others do other work, and altogether, eventually we will really go in that direction. The more people believe in the fact that this wonderful world that we think of, or that we like to dream about, is going to happen, the more possible the reality is actually going to show up. And who knows what reality is going to be in 10, 20, 50? But one part of reality is going to be what we dream of today. And that keeps me going.
So part of what we do in our work is we actually teach mindfulness and compassion to business people. So I find myself a lot standing in front of people who have never done these practices before. And that's why I see, okay, there has to be the openness that is possible. So it's super open to everyone to do it or not, because you know, when there's no safe space, it scares people a lot, and then it's also about language, right? It's like when I was still at Google, I did these trainings with engineers, and I was in Silicon Valley and telling them about mindfulness, and they'd be like, "Okay, why should I do this?" And then I started, yeah, think about this. You can change your own software. And then people were like, what? I can change my software? And that's when they started to listen. So it's strange because it's obviously not for everyone the language, but it's like, and I also sometimes struggle with it. do I meet them where they are, or do I just do my thing, you know, and show them the way I am? And so, but when I really have an openness to really go where they are, then this is actually really working well. And me and my partner, we go into these audiences a lot where people are like in their first time of even going into inner work. And we see it as that. We see it as planting seeds and giving them tools. And I'm always surprised how this works, you know. In one workshop, this one guy, he literally left the room after 2 hours and he said like, okay, this is not for me, I'm gonna go out. And I felt really insecure, right? I'm like, oh my God, maybe I should have done something differently, or maybe I should have gone to him, blah, blah, blah. So, and it was still my early stages when I did this work. And 1 year later, this guy came to me saying, you know what, I couldn't handle it on that day, but this one thing that you said, I still have it in my mind, and it's still like it shifted something inside of me, and I can't even understand what it was. And so, yeah, for me, it's always like bringing people into practice and having an experience. And it's obviously the other concept of what you usually do in business, because we talk much more. So it's like, it's this bridge between giving them a concept that they feel safe and then giving them experience. So they say, wow, I feel differently now. And what we found out is a lot of businesses say like, okay, but we only have 45 minutes. Can you do something in 45 minutes and explain this and do that? And at the beginning we were like, no, we're not doing this, right? You give us either 2 days or not. But now we are seeing it differently, so we do these 45 minutes things, and it blows my mind how 45 minutes already like make a shift in a group and everyone feels it, no one can explain it, and then you see like business people who never did that before telling you the most amazing stuff, and you're like, wow. So yeah, and so for me it's really this, like when I look into vision, what was your question, right? So the vision is that we all have more tools in hand so we can go this way together. And obviously it would be awesome if every business next to earning money would have this purpose of serving this world. Yeah, that's what I wish.
I just realized that I actually forgot to answer your question before about what do we think those businesses are going to be like. Well, I don't know what the businesses are going to be like, but I certainly know that as me as an individual, I would like to. I know what I would like to encounter, which is for everybody, which is actually, and I'm quite honest, is what I have at the moment, and that is a conscious practice of being aware of my personal purpose and the way it shifts, and a consciousness to make my daily decision of how do I show up in work and where. And if I make a decision where, I want to know that there is an organization there. I want to know that purpose of that organization. And I want to know that my personal purpose being something completely different than the purpose of the organization, but those two things are aligned. So I want to see organizations out there that I can make a clear, conscious decision about. That's where I want to invest my time, my energy, and my talent, because there I can contribute to something that is bigger than myself. And it will enable me to express my purpose in a way and in the world. That's what I think is up next.
Probably you have many questions, so you can also go on.
Yeah.
I could say something.
All right, then I'll take that invitation, although still looking forward to hear your vision maybe later. And I'm going to be a bit schematic or simplistic about this, but I'd really like to ask you guys, and I'll just ask you to raise your hand or not, like, do you feel that the purpose of business is more than just to make profit, and that there is a deeper purpose that business as a sector can play in this world and in making it better. If you agree, then please raise your hand. Well, big high five. Okay, that's great. And I mean, we're in the bubble. I'm also aware of that. But so now back to my napkin. Or not. Back to my napkin. So I think we have a pretty massive consensus here that what is going on in the business world, why isn't it contributing to more than just creating profit, maybe for a few, maybe too few? And that leads me to my next question to you guys, which is, so why doesn't purpose manifest more in business? What is holding us back, and what are the boundaries, and what are the limits, and what are the problems? Why can't we get business to be way more purposeful, as that's what all of us want?
Okay, I will try to give you an answer. And what I perceive in our society, the businesses are really good at some things. Like, they evolved and are really efficient. They try to be like really a clear hierarchy, a clear like, okay, who's responsible for this, who's responsible for that. And what's maybe missing is the human connection, or like, yeah, the world is changing a lot, we know it, and maybe now they cannot really give answers to the many changes around them. So what I see is, I'm not clear which organizations will actually survive 20 years from now, and maybe some of them will and will still transform, but what we do is often work actually with groups of people and teams. You know, we cannot transform people and we cannot transform teams, but we can help them to ask questions, and therefore we need actually a space where there's not this acceleration of time, you know, like da 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 da. Sometimes we also need just a little bit of space and time to pose big questions, which could be about purpose. Probably you know it from your work, and we also know we need kind of this empathic space where we can listen to each other empathically and dive a little bit deeper, so that the actions are kind of only above the sea level, and whatever like belief systems or worldviews, that we look at that level. And I think this is a quite big leverage point, which leads to which narratives do we tell each other.
So for me, that builds on that the purpose is really hard. It's also about unlearning. So if you have an organization, like for example, one of my clients was a big car manufacturer, and I worked there with the board, the reality was just how much unlearning there needs to happen, because they started to be a motor engineering company. That's what they build on. So the whole digital stuff gets them into what are we when suddenly electromobility comes from Bosch or Mercedes or like whatever comes just to this block, and the whole identity is shifted. And the unlearning part is so hard. That's why I believe the real purpose-driven companies will be founded by entrepreneurs that really build it from the ground up with this new conditioning. Because the other conditioning is also so entrenched into the stock market and every other system that is here. So even if you have the idea of driving a purposeful business, but you're in one of these big companies, personally, and I'm a little bit black and white here, but I think it's nearly impossible to do it. There are some great examples that try it. I haven't seen many succeeding. Proof out there, scientific proof, is that purpose-driven businesses are more successful, have a higher profit margins, and really are successful also in the business world, but you need to do it wholeheartedly. And I think there where the shift is. And when I only think about my own conditioning, then I needed to undo from coming from advertising, learning what I need to let go of in order to make creativity, use my creative force to build solutions, is so much. So no wonder that it doesn't manifest. So I think we need to manifest it with new organizations that have it at its core and make them more successful than the organizations that basically use competition as the market force to heat up a little bit the fire under the bigger organizations to really go to fundamental transformations.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a very, very complex question. You mentioned financial markets, you know. I mean, what kind of behavior does our financial market incentivize? It's certainly not a triple bottom line or a very holistic view of doing business. And so I think really reforms have to start on all macro level till the really grassroots level. But when I just look at myself personally and asking, trying to answer your question, you know, I grew up with a sense of that there are some things which I felt were right to do, but somehow my culture told me that they were not right, that you couldn't do them because it was impolite, it was not to do, you know, it was that I was transgressive. And so I feel that we all have this built in, you know. We are not, unfortunately, these free-floating, open human beings who are just fluidly responding to whatever impulses come our way and whatever impulses we feel inside us. But we have all these things where we are stuck. And companies are also very, very stuck in certain ways. And to really de-stuck these solid structures, which are very, very efficient and have proven, you know, I mean, I don't want to blame everything. I mean, we've heard before capitalism, you know, we are living in the richest time we've ever had, you know, healthy, we've never been healthier. So many indicators are so good. At the same time, we are obviously facing an enormous ecological crisis and a crisis of meaning. You know, so many, this statistic that more people commit suicide than die in wars or of violent conflict in the world every year, I mean, I think that is just breathtaking. So obviously, you know, this has a huge cultural aspect to it. And maybe one third thing I would like to mention is when you look for funding, when you are a very holistic, purpose-driven organization, it is not very easy to find funders who are aligned with your vision and who don't push you into this, you know, just optimize your numbers mode. I mean, we are at Better Place, we are a social business, you know, we started to increase the transparency of the social sector, to make crowdfunding really easy and cheap for grassroots organizations. And our own internal logic was we need to be big in order to have an impact on the German fundraising market. So our main performance indicator was how many donations do we transfer through the platform, and not how much money is going to good projects, because there are so many shitty NGO projects, no? I mean, so, but that's not what we are counting. We are counting how much money in total do we make. And that has for the past 11 years been our key metric. And we are very purposeful, so we constantly find that we have to make compromises in this way because funders and also the logic of the market makes it at least challenging. It makes it twice as hard if you really want to stay to your purpose. And probably if we wouldn't have had that KPI, we wouldn't be here anymore. Because if we had just tried to develop value, you know, impact criteria for good nonprofits who are worthy of the funds we are channeling through the platform. So it's lots of complexity.
Yeah, I'm really glad we're talking about evolution and not revolution, because the thing is, I think in order to walk forward, it's important not to fight against something, but to bring in further development forward. I mean, like, I don't know who, you said something, I mean, where our systems have brought us is a level of education, a level of health, and so on and so on. So there's a lot of good stuff that has happened. And being profit-driven for organizations has been the right thing to do for a very, very long time. That brought us here. I think economy originally was defined as service to humanity, service to society, but somewhere along the way it shifted. And because of the continuous growth paradigm, we had to start to create market, because there was a moment where there was enough, but of course, in order to grow more, you had to create more need, and then that whole thing, I think, really shifted, and businesses and economy became service to itself and not service to society. And the expressions that, the negative expressions of that, to me, is the decadence of a system. And so what we need now is not fighting a system that we have truly all created ourselves, but is sort of the next step forward. Making a profit isn't bad because it's like breathing. We breathe to live, we don't live to breathe. So a business can make profit in order to fulfill its purpose. And I think it's also a shift of how do we define profit. It is a deep, complete, and as everybody has said here, unlearning of some truths that are so embedded in our head about how business, the only way business can function, and it's that unlearning. And I think it's the only way that will happen is by just doing what your purpose is and believe that this is going to shift something. And it is. And we are in a bubble here, but all of us are in continuous contact with people out there who are not in the bubble. And those people are starting to seriously listen, and that's very inspiring.
So we had one idea to break the pattern and unlearn this idea that we are on the stage and you sit here and listen to us. So the idea is please pair up with your neighbor. So 2 people sitting next to each other. So when there's 3, you just go to the next person. Very easy exercise. So pair up with another person, please. And now we want to extend the dialogue to you. So you look, maybe introduce yourself quickly. So there's still 3 persons here. The exercise is to have 2 next to each other. There's one single over there. Perfect, everybody's found a partner. Yeah, we can. That's a good idea. All right. So you also need to listen for the exercise. All right, so you have 2 questions. The first question is, what do you feel is your biggest contribution to the world? And the second one is, what is a challenge out there that you see that you would solve with that contribution, right? So your biggest talent and what you want to solve out there. And the exercise is really hard on learning that. 1 person talks and 1 person listens with all of their presence and awareness and all of the stuff we learned this morning, right? So 1 person talks, 1 person listens, and we have 2 minutes each. So I will let you know when we switch, and after that we do a little bit of sharing. How does it sound? Got the exercise? Perfect. So 2 minutes now for the first person. I think it's a good idea to collect them. So maybe all of us can go around. Yeah. Yeah, and so hey, what do you think is the biggest thing with this goal? Yeah, I have. Yeah. Genau. Wenn wir Lust haben, kommen wir hier. Genau. Ich will fast das zu sehen lassen. So, hey, was kann ich für dich hoch? Das hat immer gut rauskommen bei den Panels. Wir sitzen vorne und gehen was das ist super schwierig. Deswegen ist ja eigentlich Fischball immer nett, aber ich mache es eigentlich auch immer, dass ich irgendwie dann zu schaden oder ich stelle mir das Zweiergruppen habe. Vielleicht gehen wir rum mit dem Mikrofon. Wir schwärmen aus und sagen, hey, was kam bei euch raus? Interessant, dass die Leute immer die Übung nicht verstehen, dass einer redet und der andere zuhört.
Oh my God, we're so talking. Shit, I messed it up. Das haben wir echt abgemessen.
Genau, oder wir gehen einfach hin und halten es den Leuten.
Ja, aber wenn wir es alle gleichzeitig machen.
So. Achso, du sagst wer wo?
Alice sagt wer wo.
Und wir schwärmen aus und sind einfach in der Mitte und du sagst ja. All right, please finish your thoughts. And now, really important what I saw, like we in Germany, we stick to rules, right? So one person talks, one person listens. One person talks, one person listens. We're in Germany, we like our rules. So now we switch, and the other person talks, and the other person listens. Just listen. All right? Switch, please. Ich habe das neulich bei einem Vortrag gemacht vom Rotary-Club mit Schülern. Das war so habt ihr dann aber intergenerational zusammengemischt. Und das war, was da rausgekommen ist, also 3 Minuten. Ja, genau. Was da rausgekommen ist, war faszinierend. Danach die Leute, du siehst ja, wenn bei jemandem was.
Ja, klar, wenn was aufgegangen ist.
Wenn du zwischen so.
Ja, klar.
Und ich hatte nach dem Vortrag, weil es war so geschlossen, ich hatte übernachtet, ich habe von 11 war ich fertig und bis um 1:30 reihenweise Gespräche gehabt, weil die Leute eine nach dem anderen, was hier aufgekommen ist. Das ist so wichtig, weil wir sind ja hier auch jetzt Altersdurchschnitt irgendwie auch, sag ich mal, ähnlich jung teilweise. Du hebst so ein bisschen, aber das finde ich großartig. Nein, das ist halt so wichtig, weil gerade dieses Purpose-Ding so ein Millennial-Ding ist, wo jeder nur sagt, ich will, aber die Realität ist einfach eine andere. Du musst die Erfahrung, die Lebensweisheit mischen mit der Lebensenergie. Wir haben bei 3 Minuten, das ist dann zu Ende, 2 Minuten each.
Aber doch ab jetzt schon, weil sonst haben wir gar keine Zeit.
Okay. So, was soll ich sagen? Okay, so, das war's. Und wir kommen jetzt alle vom Panel mal runter und sammeln ein paar Stimmen ein. Oh, sorry, so we are now going around with our microphones. Be quiet again. You can continue that conversation. We love to see that energy bubbling. So,
Okay.
we're coming from the panel with these magic microphones to collect some of these voices. So, and we love to hear a few sound bites. What came up for you during that process?
Yeah, we were just talking about, obviously the questions that we just had all. Jan said that he thinks his contribution might be, first he thought products, making better products, right? And then maybe the idea is not anymore making better products, but to was ist Verzicht? In English? Okay, to not consume much anymore, or not as much as we did before, because our resources are getting scarce. Everyone knows that and everything. So, does it have to be the deal to look at new, better products, or should it be rather a different mindset towards consuming? And please continue.
That's fine. Yeah, we were all discussing always in purpose and stuff, how do we make better companies? And companies and organizations are just one part of a society, and there are other systems and structures that, like governance and education, and they have nothing to do with each other. And we're thinking, for me, at least from my perspective, way too much in organizational structures, and that are combined with market surroundings or in the context of markets, and how to get rid of that and come back to, like in German we have that nice word of Zivilgesellschaft, civil society and discuss that more on a level where everybody's included. We are not talking about new products and new books and new talks and new TED Talks and new conferences and new blah, blah, blah. Besides that, going out to schools, going out to our neighbors and being on that level and not in these big thoughts.
Thank you very much. So we are now passing on to the next voice.
Hi, Tiffany Terra here. I love talking on microphones, so very happy. What came up for me and Sarah is we're very connected in the work we do, using vulnerability and authenticity in organization. What comes out of this? For me, I'm doing theater work, and we're diving into this realm of separating dualities, of bringing everything, our creative energy and different taboos on stage. Yes, and I will hand the microphone to Sarah.
Thank you. Yes, so we've been discovering that we really share this passion for diving into vulnerability and for bringing people together. For me, it's really, it's a passion, and I'm just discovering it. Just it's not really formed yet, but I'm now discovering that it would be amazing to bring together people who are willing and able to create from the heart and to really be in service. And this is like a sprout that is in me for a project that I will be continuing. Yeah, thank you.
Nice. Thank you very much. We just go over here. Maybe you want to share a little bit what you had a conversation about?
In our conversation, we are very connected to the point of Joana Breidenbach, and we had a very critical perspective on the panel. In our understanding, it's a classical postmodern perspective, and we think we need a really shift to a postmodern thinking, as Joana Breidenbach pointed out. At the beginning, a really shift to holistic feeling, holistic thinking, and then you can working in a completely different energy. And I think this is one of the big gap, also really what you told about what's going on in the marketplace and in the business world. And I think this is really essential.
Thank you very much.
So I have exactly 2 more seconds to close, and I think what really came out of this conversation is that there's more than just one purpose that we can fulfill through business, and I'm very much looking forward to how all of these purposes will manifest in business, and I'd love to thank these amazing panelists with a big applause together, and thank you.